Ever since the 16th century, when the church was canonizing a saint, a person would be appointed to be the skeptic, or argue against the potential saint. This person was known as the devil's advocate. Today, I will play the part of the devil's advocate. I'm Nick Boratenski.
This is Kyle Hyman here with Nick Boratenski for Devil's Advocate. How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing all right. Don't know how well prepared I am for this one.
All right. Topic of the day. I hear people say this a lot, and I think they do it with the best of intentions, but I feel like it can be misleading and confusing if it doesn't go unchecked. So the thing I hear people say is everything happens for a reason. And the context of this is usually when something bad happens, whether it be a natural disaster or an illness or some like a school shooting or something like that, they'll say, well, everything happens for a reason. And what I think they mean by that is that God is in control. And what I think is sometimes interpreted as is that God wanted that to happen. Like God wanted this bad thing to happen to you. And here's where I think it gets a little tricky is because God does allow these things to happen. Obviously, God is in control. He can do or not do whatever he wants. He can stop anything that he wants. He is in full control. He allows things to happen. That doesn't mean he wants them to happen. The true thing that we could say, though, is that God can bring good things out of bad things. And we see this with the crucifixion, right? A bad thing happened. An innocent person was killed and suffered. That was a bad thing that happened, but God was able to bring a good out of that event. And when we're sick, when a tragedy happens, I don't think it's healthy for us to say God wanted that to happen. And I don't think it's accurate. I do think we can say, how can we use this as an opportunity for God to grow us, to make us a better person? God can bring good out of evil. God can bring good out of tragedy. He can bring good out of suffering. That doesn't mean that he wanted it or he wills it to happen.
All right. So, obviously, God does allow these things to happen. As a Catholic, I can't necessarily argue that. But as always, I will try and step into the shoes of somebody else and try and think of it from their angle. And I think it kind of comes down to mindset of there's a difference between knowing that God allows this to happen and God wants this to happen. If you can believe that God wants this to happen, it can bring a sense of closure. Because it's like, oh, well, if God wanted this to happen, it must be okay. Like something good's going to happen to me, or, it was for a reason. But then it's like God allowed it to happen. Okay, so does he actually have something that he's going to make good out of this? He just allowed it. He gave us free will, so he just didn't step in this time. So is there really something that's going to be good coming from this? Is this really what was meant to happen? Or was this just the devil stepping in? Or was this just free will? So when you can think that it's what God actually wants, that just completely changes it up. And, when we're given closure, sometimes it helps us move forward and we can kind of restructure our past, present, and make the future in a healthier, better way. And it's just through that understanding that we almost want God to want that wrong that can help us move forward and keep us from honestly going into a deeper, darker place.
Yeah, and I think we definitely need to encourage people that are going through tragedies, that are going through struggles. But to say that God wanted that to happen to you, I think can be a very misleading and confusing statement to say. Here's where I think we have two different situations. One is, I guess the question would be, why did that thing happen? And there are two potential explanations. One is that evil exists, evil is real, we have free choice. So why did a school shooting happen? Well, it was because somebody made a bad choice. God did not want that to happen. He allows it to happen because having free will is greater than us being some kind of robotic people that can't choose, and we can't love if we don't have the choice. So God gives us free will so that and that's a whole nother topic to get into free will. But we have free will, so we can choose to do a bad thing. The other aspect would be natural disasters, and that God created nature and it works in a certain way. And when certain weather patterns happen, disasters happen. God allows that to happen because that is how nature works. Those two different situations are why something happened, but to say that it was because God wanted it to happen is different than to say that God allows it to happen. In the same way, I as a parent might allow my child to make a mistake, but I don't want my child to make a mistake. But I might allow that to happen because I give him free will, and I say, you know what, you can go over to your friend's house. I hope you make a good decision, right? And if he does something over there, he gets in a fight or whatever. Like, I didn't want that to happen, but I allowed it to happen to give him the opportunity to do the right thing.
Right. What father would ever wish or want tragedy upon their child? But I think, again, it really is just, well, go to natural disasters, right? Even the secular world, who's to blame? Like, they need an out. They want someone to blame. So who are they going to blame? God. Just because there's no one else that they can.
It's an act of God.
It is an act of God.
Yeah.
I love some companies' contracts or, handbooks will say, like, buying an act of God, you should be at work or something like that. I always found that very interesting that people would put that in, like, a contract.
Yeah.
Anyways, I digress. And I think when it comes to tragedy and thinking that everything happens for a reason, I mean, it's difficult to lose someone in your life. And again, let's just say they die of old age or die of, cancer or something like that. Again, where are you putting the blame? Everybody wants to put the blame on someone. And I feel like when you're saying it's just God allowing it, they're not going to say, oh, then it's his fault. And obviously we shouldn't be saying that. Again, devil's advocate here. But that's what people want. People always want someone to blame, someone to assume responsibility for these tragedies happen. And if it's just somebody allowing it to happen, they don't feel like that means they can fully take responsibility for it. So they switch it to saying, God wanted this to happen. God wanted this tragedy to happen. So now I can blame him.
Right. So I think the healthier and better thing to say to somebody is, I realize that this is a horrible thing that happened, or that you're suffering, or that you're in pain, or that you are dealing with loss. But to say, hey, God can help you through this, or that God can make you stronger because of this, or God can use this as an opportunity to help you be even better than you were before. Those are good things. They're right and they're true. But to say that everything happens for a reason, implying that God wanted that to happen to you, is not something that we should be doing, even with the best of intentions.
Yeah, and then there's also those people who feel like they've led really sinful and bad lives. God's punishing me. God wants this bad thing to be happening to me. And again, that's where they're, coming up with reasons why these things happened. I've led such a sinful life. God wants to punish me. He wants these bad things to happen to me because of all the bad things I have done.
So, yeah, it's in John 10:10 where Jesus says, I have come that you would have life and have it to the fullest, that you would have it abundantly. Like, God wants us to have this full, abundant life. He doesn't want us to be sad, upset, miserable, but he wants us to find joy even in the sacrifice and even in the suffering that we might be going through. Like, he still wants what's best for us. He wants us to be joyful and wants us to have an abundant life.
See, it's tough when you quote the New Testament, because I was just going to come back with the Old Testament of Noah, and he's like, no, I want everybody gone. Right. I just want to reset.
Right. Reset. Yeah.
But, and some people do also use that as reasoning for it of, well, obviously God was willing at one point to cleanse the earth and start over. And it's interesting to look at the world today. How close is this world to where it was then?
Well, in some ways, there might be some similarities, but very different way is that we are living in the New Testament. We are living in a post-Jesus era. We are living the resurrection. So it's a completely different world. And that,
like I said, it's unfair when you quote the New Testament.
Okay. But not everything happens for a reason. It does happen for a reason because people make bad decisions and nature can cause disasters.
And if you turn to God, God normally does help bring something good out of a bad situation.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. Nick, for Devil's Advocate, are we on the same page then?
I think I'll have to agree to disagree on this one, Kyle.